So good evening and welcome to the third annual Why Didn't I Ask? This program began following a conversation with Stacy Goldring, who was the director of the Searching for Identity Foundation. And it was about the many firsthand accounts of Jewish life lost because we did not ask our parents or our grandparents the details of their lives that we would love to know. And now there's no one to ask. So we have chosen to formally interview women in our community who led fascinating and significant lives from which we all benefit. We encourage everyone to ask their family members and friends to retell the stories of their lives. Everyone has a story. Everyone's life is significant. Our storyteller this evening is Marsha Pollock. Everything I know about Jacksonville and its Jewish community, I have learned from my dear friend Marsha, who has devoted her life to family and community. Her bio would take up too much of our allocated time. Needless to say, she's been involved in every Jewish organization I could name. The very first female president of the Jacksonville Jewish Center, she still actively serves on many local boards. A life member of Hadassah, it has been a constant in her life because of the amazing things that Hadassah has made happen in Israel and America. Let me tell you about just one miracle that was recently reported in the Times of Israel. In a procedure Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem is calling the first case of its kind in the world, doctors saved both ovaries of a premature fetus by delivering her in an emergency cesarean section and performing surgery on her just a half an hour after birth. When the mother went in for an ultrasound this past February in her 35th week of pregnancy, the scan revealed huge cysts on both of the fetus's ovaries. The cysts were causing ovarian torsion or twisting, a serious condition that, if not treated immediately, leads to the deaths of the organs. Ovarian torsion is often, but not solely, caused by one or more cysts on the ovary, whose weight causes the ovary to twist. This cuts off the blood vessels that nourish the organ, thus depriving it of oxygen. And when this happens, the ovary dies, damaging fertility and the hormonal production needed for female health. Normally, we don't see a fetus's ovaries in a regular scan, but the ovaries in this fetus were so large due to the cysts that took up much of the baby's abdomen, they were impossible to miss. In almost all cases, when an ovarian cyst or ovarian torsion is detected in the fetus, it is only in one ovary. There's controversy about what to do, but most of us do nothing because even if the ovary is twisted, then most likely you've already missed the train in terms of saving it. And also, you still have another ovary as backup. In the case of the baby treated in February, both ovaries were affected, making it not only extremely rare, but also very worrisome. Using a special ultrasound feature, because there was still blood flow in both ovaries, time became of the essence. An induced vaginal birth was also not a safe option, so the baby was delivered by emergency C-section and taken immediately for surgery. A small incision was made in the baby's abdomen called a mini laparotomy. And through this incision, they managed to get to the ovaries, untwist them, and drain the cysts. Fortunately for the baby born at Hadassah and her parents, the story ended differently. Now 6 months old, she's had some follow-up checks at the hospital, and by all indications, she should grow up with healthy ovaries. These miracles happen because of our support of the healthcare and social service system in Israel, irrespective of the political situation. Before I turn the program over to Helen, I remind you to please mute yourselves. And if you have questions, as Helen said, please put them in the chat and we'll ask as time permits. Beautiful, always stylish, and amazing wife, mother, and grandmother, I'm honored to present to this conversation Marsha's daughter, my adopted niece, Joy Nebel, Helen Hill, and of course, my dear friend, Marsha Pollock. Helen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shirley. Well, I really am taking a step backwards to be in charge of the slides here. So I'm going to ask, as I'm doing this, for Marsha and Joy to unmute. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, I think I am too. All right, here we go. Joy?
Okay. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for that very kind introduction, Aunt Shirley and Helen. And it's been a real pleasure to work with you and through this whole process. It's been fantastic and a lot of fun. So as many of you may or may not know, I wasn't born here in Jacksonville. I was actually born in Atlanta, Georgia, along with my sister and brother. However, I did move here to Jacksonville when I was in the 4th grade. So I basically tell everybody I was raised in Jacksonville along with, obviously, my mom. So as you can see here in this very first slide, there are photos of my mom who was born here in Jacksonville. And so, Mom, I'd like to turn it over to you now and ask the question of, when you were born in Jacksonville, what hospital were you born in? And were you the first generation to be born in Jacksonville, or were your parents and grandparents born here as well?
Joy, I was born in St. Vincent's Hospital in Riverside, but I am actually the 3rd generation to live here, but only my father was born here. He also was born in Jacksonville on Evergreen Avenue. They were all, I think, in that day born at home. And my grandmother came and my grandparents, but they came later. And my dad is a native and I am a native.
Great. And in that picture on the right, if I'm not mistaken, is that my Aunt Anne's house? And I know you were living there when you were an infant or a toddler. Is that home? Were you living there? And what side of town is that?
That is over off of Atlantic Boulevard, and it was a brand new new community built over there near where today would be Bishop Kenny in that area. A lot of Jewish people lived over there with us, the Silvermans and the Geffens and the Levin, Harriet Levin, and all of Ronnie Levin was at my birthday party at 1, because we all lived in that neighborhood. At St. Nicholas here, like I said, on the south side, on the way to Beach Boulevard, where it splits off between Beach and Atlantic. Lots of Jewish people, so it was a community, but they were the first to come to Southside. This was in Southside, and most people lived in Springfield or on La Villa, or they lived on Riverside. The ones that lived in Riverside, later transferred, but this was a brand new home that my father built, and it was always in our house till just a few years ago. It was our family. My dad built it, my grandmother lived it, then my aunt lived in it, so it's been in our it's still there over there, but my aunt, when she passed away, it was sold. So it's sad to be out of the neighborhood,
Yeah. So, your grandparents, so not my grandparents, but your grandparents, I understand that they were also in the retail business. And that I always remember stories of your grandmother, not your great grandparents, but your grandmother coming from Romania. Do you have any other history with regards to your grandparents and great grandparents?
My grandparents came over with her brother, older Moskovitz, Joseph and Anna Moskovitz. They were a married couple. My grandmother and grandfather were engaged, and they came over with them. I was shocked to find out that they came over like chaperone, that the parents let them come over and they weren't married. They came over from Romania, and you can see the wedding picture there in the middle as my grandmother and grandfather. And one on the left are my great grandparents. They sent, all the brothers and sisters sent for their parents later. So my great grandparents came over. I really do not know them. I never knew them. They were, you know, of course, gone. I only knew my grandmother. My grandfather was gone when I grew up. So I had one grandmother, and so all those Moskovitz and Horovitz family, I found out later that we're related to Horovitz. That means like Bruce and their family are all related by my great grandmother was a Horovitz. She married a Moskovitz. So my great grandmother. And then my grandmother was here and I got to enjoy her. And then my dad, you can see in the other picture, was one of 7 children, also born in Jacksonville. So I'm 3rd generation living here, 2nd generation born here.
So of all your, you know, obviously I knew all of my great aunts and uncles here in Jacksonville. I got to spend a lot of time with all of them as we were growing up, but I did not know your Uncle Meyer. So, you know, he was in the war. Do you have any history about that and what was, you know, World War II and how did he...
There were 17 Jewish men that were called to war here in World War II. He was a pilot, he was in the war, and on his last mission, they were shot down. Well, the community may have the Jewish war veterans here, a big, large group of Jewish war veterans. I don't think they meet anymore. There's a flag in the center archives about it. And it was called the Lieutenant Meyer Leibovitz Post 199. So it was a big honor. And they had a room at the Y on Riverside Avenue that was named after him also. So he was an exemplary student, you know, like National Honor Society student. He had a beautiful voice. He was in the center choir, etc. So, you know, it was a shame. And he died like at 24. So in the war.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So, you know, the next slide is really talking about your grandmother with her brother. So how did they come to Jacksonville?
Well, Uncle Dave Moss and Louis Moss, and they came over and they started their businesses. If you can see there, my grandmother is one daughter of the 5 or 6 brothers, five there in the picture. And I was lucky, I knew them all. And my Uncle Rudy, which is Deanna Listener's dad, lived next door to us. So it was great having them right next door. My dad and Deanna are first cousins. There's David Moss was president of the Jacksonville Jewish Center. Louis Moss and Rudy were owners of the Young Men's Shop downtown.
Great, next slide.
All in retail. Speaking of retail.
Yeah, which leads us actually to the next slide, which is really all about retail when you look at it. Obviously, there were a lot of Jewish retailers in Jacksonville at that time. We had Cohen Brothers or May Cohen's, Birchkitz, Young Men's Shop, and French Novelty. And we were laughing the other day because not only, you know, was there Leibo's Big and Tall or Leibo's Executive Shop, but there was all these other retailers. And we were laughing, like I said, because I worked at a lot of these establishments myself as I was growing up here in Jacksonville in high school. So this was this the downtown area, and was it always downtown?
Oh, we had a fabulous downtown in Jacksonville. And actually, most of the merchants downtown were Jewish families that you can see French Novelty, French Novelty, Birchkitz, Cohen Brothers. That Cohen's was the largest department store in the U.S. at one time. And it was Jewish man that owned it. Birchkitz, the Birchkitz family also was here. And French Novelty, of course, the Mizrahis. and I grew up with all of the people, and everyone was in retail, including all of our family. My uncles were in retail. And my cousin Mike Listener had the young men's shop later on. And my daughter Joy worked at French Novelty since she was 16. So, and then she went to the Vogue Body Shop, which was also a Jewish family.
Right. But we were also talking about your family in general with retailers, like even my great aunts and great uncles were in retail as well. Bernie Davis, Izzy Weiss, like they all had retail establishments as well as my grandfather. So, and then, you know, Uncle Wally working at the store at Leibo's. So it's kind of really fun time. And I have a lot of great memories from all of these stores, Leibo's. So Mom, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Leibo's and how it expanded and grew over the years? I know we had another store in Live Oak as well.
The one picture on the left is Leibo's when it first started, like in 1939, in a small store. Eventually it developed into 2 stores. You know, they enlarged and make it so that whole thing was the front and back. It was on Bay Street. Bay Street, what building is it now? The bank building, that's where Barbara works. Anyway, right where Morgan Stanley and those groups are in that building on Bay Street, that was the location of Leibo's. And then later on the right, it was moved to Southside because the bank building, First National Bank, was redoing everything and everything was torn up. So we moved the location then. But my dad had 3 Leibo's stores, one in Arlington, one in Paxson Center, and the one downtown. But he also had a tie store, a shirt shop, different businesses over the years. And when the Gibbs Company in Live Oak, when he moved here and retired, Sam Gibbs, my father purchased that store, which was a department store also. So I was lucky that I could get clothes and things from our retail store. My Uncle Izzy had fashion men's shop. Like I said, the others had the young men's shop. So we all are in the schmata business.
Yeah, I guess the retail is in our blood. But I do have some really fun memories from growing up at Leibo's when it was downtown, where the elevators were the gates and you would go up, you know, just like the old days at Furchgit's was the same way. There was the elevator person and they would close the gates to the elevator and you would go upstairs, which was really fun times.
Right.
Early life in Jacksonville. So as far as the synagogues go, like I remember when we moved here and I was in the 4th grade, I would ride the bus to a synagogue, which I guess was on Silver Street. And I know that there's some history with all the synagogues before the Jewish Center moved to Mandarin and all of that. So do you want to give us a little history lesson on all these different shuls?
Well, picture on the left is the original Chava Chesed. When I grew up, Temple was in Riverside on Riverside Avenue in the corner there. It's now condominium, but that was the Temple that I knew growing up. The Temple's the oldest synagogue in Jacksonville, and the B'nai Israel in the middle is the Jacksonville Jewish Center, but at that time it was Orthodox in 1901. In fact, I chaired the 100th anniversary of the Jacksonville Jewish Center in 2001. And so the center, that's the winner. But on the right was the place I grew up. It's not a synagogue, it's the activity center. The congregation went from B'nai Israel to Jacksonville Jewish Center on 3rd and Silver Street. Most of the Jews had transferred over to Southside, Riverside. And so we had buses that took us to Sunday. The blue bus was for Riverside kids with Tim as the driver. And the Jacksonville other side was a yellow bus with Morris as the driver. So we would catch the bus to go to synagogue. I mean, you know, for activity, preschool. I was in the preschool. So, but the synagogue, you know, they're still going strong. And we have more congregations, you know, included in Jacksonville now. So it's thriving. Not as it used to be. It was pretty busy But it's great that we have these wonderful synagogues here in Jacksonville.
So did you go to Hebrew? You said you went to Hebrew school on the bus. Did you have to go multiple times a week, or was it once a week? And
Oh, yeah.
what about Saturdays?
The bus would pick us up at school, different schools. Like, we would wait outside across the street and where we knew he was going to pick us up. And all of us got on the bus. That was probably the most fun, was going on the bus all the way to school, because we got to see all the other kids that we were friends with. And the ones from Riverside would sometimes come now, on Saturday, on Shabbat, we would have to ride the city bus. We would go on Hendricks Avenue. I'd get on the city bus. We had a transfer downtown in a not so wonderful area. We would get off that bus and get on another bus to go to 3rd and Silver Street. And then after synagogue, we would walk to town and go visit all our families. Like, we'd go into French Avenue, get money, and we go into the Leibo. You know, we visit our folks that were in retail downtown, and then go on to town. And the girls from Riverside sometimes would come home with us on Saturday from services, spend the night, and go back through Sunday school. They would go back to Sunday school with us, and then their parents or whoever would get them from the center, so that they could be with all of us if they still lived on the other side.
Because that was, at that point in time, they were still living in Riverside, and a lot of you had already moved to San Marco at that point.
Yes.
Correct. Right. Okay.
Or all the way down San Jose. There was one particular street that everybody lived on, and by the duck pond. And I wanted to be on that Waterman Road North and Waterman Road South, was all the Jewish kids living there. So it was all the way down pretty much San Jose.
Okay. Next. So this is one of the first classes, a photo of one of the first classes from Congregation B'nai Israel, and mostly, I guess, immigrants. Do you recognize any of the individuals in this photo?
Yes, there was a huge group of Pushalaters from Pushalat, and which is now like Lithuania, or is Lithuania, and that particular town has the majority of the immigrants here in Jacksonville. There were Russia, Germany, Poland. The temple were more the German Jews, and that's when it ended up going from Orthodox to Reform, and then the people that were Orthodox went to the conservative. So my aunts and uncles are in my dad are in that picture. Your papa is the one second row from the top in like a hat, like a beanie that's two-tone. I think that's him. And my Aunt Edie's and Ann are in the front row on the right. So they all went. That picture looks like it was on the steps over on Jefferson Avenue or Duval, one of those streets in downtown.
So if there's anybody on the call that recognizes any of the individuals in these photos, we would love to hear if anybody else recognizes anyone.
I see Julie Halpern, Julie Mizrahi. I see plenty in the bigger, when you can stretch it bigger, you'll know a lot of the people.
Yeah. If you recognize anyone else though, please put it in the chat so we can all see, but because I'm sure there are a lot of familiar faces to many of us. So next slide.
Yeah.
So here, go ahead.
Right.
Here we have some of the community organizations. So the Young Men's Hebrew Association, which is, I guess this was, like you said, where people went prior to a Jewish community center or a JCA like we have here in Jacksonville now, the Young Men's Hebrew Association, and then also the groundbreaking at River Garden. Were you actually at that groundbreaking? Do you remember it?
I was 4 years old. 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, so you were there?
Yeah, well, we used to go every Sunday. My folks would take me to River Garden maybe to see somebody or visit people. And then when my grandmother was here, but we would go, and they had a big backyard. It was the old house on the river near St. Vincent's Hospital. And so we would they would go in and visit, and we could play in the yard. So we rolled, we played ball, we ran around outside. but there was no fence on the river. No fence. We just were left there by ourselves. It was fine. Nobody died or anything. At that point, I think the river was, you could almost step in it. It was so low at that time. But
Wow.
the Young Men's Association, YMHA, I had never heard of that in my life until I said it's like the YMCA. But my dad said, no, it was the YMHA. So they had a Hebrew association just like the Y, and they did all their activities and dances. And I think those steps that are coming down might have been the picture of where that Hebrew group was sitting on steps. It could have been that building, which they say it's Elks Lodge. I think it was started in 1914, and it was on Duval Street. I don't know. I was told Jefferson, Duval, but in that area of Jacksonville. That building, I think, is there. They might have torn it down by now, but it was there for a long time. It wasn't, it says here it's the lodge. I don't know if they've, since taken the lodge away too.
Yeah. Next slide.
Oops.
So here we are getting into the school days, and this is your kindergarten class. And I know you remember your kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Reiser. And I am sure that there are many of your lifelong friends in these photos that I've met over the many years and had the opportunity. I know you keep in touch with a lot of them. And so here's another photo for everybody that's on the call. If you recognize any of these faces, feel free to put those names in the chat. But it goes from B'nai Israel, or the center, which you mentioned. I think you said it only was a lower school. They didn't have any of the additional grades at that time, right?
No, this was just a kindergarten class, or nursery school to kindergarten, like 3, 4, 5-year-olds, because I'm in there on the down from the first row where everybody's standing. Paula Klausner's in that one, and Sarah Husney. On the second row, on the right is Renee Montaigne, and then I'm the third one. I see Michael Greenberg, Rochelle Pogman, Judy Shorstein on that row, George Levin, Faye Garber is there. Judy Paul is the second row up, the third one in. So on the right is my grammar school. Now that I got to choose, where I'm in the middle of the line on San Jose Boulevard on Holly Lane. Well, I could choose, am I going to Hendricks Avenue or I'm going to Southside Grammar? And at that time, Southside Grammar had a cafeteria kind of lunch thing, and you could sit in there, and Hendricks didn't. So I went to that one, and it was on the way to town. My dad was going to work, so it was good for me to go to Southside Grammar, and it was Southside Grammar number 7. That makes me really old, and it's now a condominium. It's there on Cedar Street, I think. And then I went on to Landon, which was a high school, not a junior. We had, anyway, Debbie Mizrahi Katz is on the first row of that school picture with the stripes around her dress. So, and I see Barbara Rothfeder and Shirley Lazarus. So there were a few people in our public school. I'm on the top on where the boys are, because I was tall. I'm with the boys.
So really, after kindergarten, you went to public school. Pretty much you went to public school your whole life and went to Hebrew school and services, right, and things like that. And I know you had a bat mitzvah, but did all the girls?
At 12, I was bat mitzvah, and I was confirmed and married at the Jacksonville Jewish Center. And y'all were
as well. But was it common then for girls to have bat mitzvah like it is today, or not so much?
We were the first group. Our class was a large group, I guess, we're the war babies, and we were bat mitzvah because the first one was Rabbi Tofield's older daughter, and she was the first one. She was older than us, and he got it through. He got a lot of things. He got USY, youth group, all that, because he was on the National Rabbinic Council, and he got his daughter, had a bat mitzvah. And then the next group was us. And we were bat mitzvah. We were on Friday night and Saturday, but we did not do tour. We didn't do Haftorah. We did reading. We had speeches. We did readings. We did all the prayers that we could do. But it isn't like today where you could do, the whole thing. But our girls there were like so many of us. Some had double bat mitzvahs together. I had mine alone, but like Renee and Shirley Kravitz had theirs together. And so there were a lot of bat mitzvahs in our class.
Yeah, and it was a different rabbi. Obviously, I only know Rabbi Gaffney, but the Cantor Martin was there at that time, right? Who I obviously know as well.
Yes.
Was Cantor Martin there?
Yes.
Must have been very, very young. And obviously with me, he was much older.
Moved there and brought Pearl with him. And she's still going. She's still alive. So it's amazing. She's made Jacksonville her home.
Yeah. And then you were also involved in some extracurricular activities that also the Girl Scout troop. Was it a Jewish Girl Scout troop as a part of the synagogue?
The center had a big Girl Scout troop. You can see the Brownies and then the Girl Scouts. And Harriet Levin, Ronnie's mother, was one of mine, but Blanche Schlott was my scout leader. And she helped me get through when I'd cry and say, I can't do this. I can't do this. She said, she pushed me through so that I got all the badges. Still can't cook or sew, but I got a badge. So anyway, there was great years, and we went to Girl Scout camp and, stuff like that. And then, of course, Jacksonville had a Young Judea, an active Young Judea group. We also had B'nai B'rith girls and AZA boys, but the Young Judea was sponsored by Hadassah. And a lot of the girls on the front row is Penny Bromberg and Marilyn Mass is in this picture too. It's hard to see. Judy Davis is in the picture. It's hard when it's little. I have to stretch everything when I see anything. But a lot of the girls you all know were in that picture. If you are, let us know.
Yeah. So, and then there were the BBYO or BBG AZA, which obviously is still around today. And it looks like you were right there in the center of all those boys. The AZA chapter, and I think you mentioned to me that you were the sweetheart of that chapter, right?
Those were, yeah, there's Ricky Wolfson on the right is there, and Stanley Gelman, a lot of the kids, but Randy Haas is in that picture. 11, one of 11 boys. I see a lot of people in there that, were in that particular AZA group. But the big thing in Jacksonville, which was unusual anywhere else, is the Esquire Club. And all the guys had an Esquire Club. It goes back early before. And they had big events, socials every year, a ball with long dresses and gowns and everything. But the boys that were in there, most of them, when they got to the University of Florida, became TEPs, the Tau Epsilon Phi, they became TEPs. So on the back page, they have alumni on the back that went to college or, that are in college for their events. They were still listed in the book. And then they had the Junior Esquire, which like Gary Fletcher and Annette Pilton, Annette, all those people were in Esquire, and they had sweethearts. And I still have some of the books. I kept them. And beautiful events, beautiful parties, guys. But it was the social thing to do. They had things at the beach, and the girls would go to the beach and have parties down there. So Esquire, and they did good things. They had to raise money and did all this, not just social, but they did a lot of good things. So that was something different that Jacksonville had that I haven't seen anywhere else.
So did Beauclair Country Club exist at that time, or was this much earlier? Because I know that I feel like Beauclair Country Club was somewhat of a Jewish country club, even though it really wasn't, right? But a lot of people,
it was a Jewish country club, definitely.
Which is where the JCA is today.
That's where JCA is today. That's where I
Yeah.
grew up. And I had a rehearsal dinner at the Beauclair Country Club. We named the street when it was turned over, and we named that street Beauclair Road. I mean, they gave us choices, different names, and we chose the Beauclair name. And the street names were, Beauclair is now further out, but that's where that came from, was the Beauclair Country Club, the Beauclair Road, which is exactly where the center was. That was the golf course where the Villages of San Jose is, was the golf course for the club.
Yeah, very nice. So I know some of the, when Stacy and I sit down with you and we talk about, history and fun times, and we hear all the stories, I know you always say that you couldn't have asked for a better childhood. That's something that has always stuck with me. You said it was a dream. And I just wanted, I guess, to hear a little bit more about it. Obviously, there's a picture here of my papa and Nana and you and my Uncle Meyer, and then the home that you grew up in San Marco on Holly Lane, which I do remember going there and swimming there as a very little girl before we moved here, obviously. But I know all your great aunts and uncles and your cousins were always a big part of your childhood. And do you want to expand upon that a little bit more? And, all the Jewish families in the neighborhood, I think that was common that you guys hung out and did things like that.
Right. Well, I do want to mention that because of my mother, I did all these things. I tell you, she set me right about that. But my brother, I miss my brother. He was unfortunately killed at 38 years old on San Jose Boulevard, right across from the Villages, at that spot that has a couple of family members at that particular point that got killed. But anyway, life on Holly Lane was great. And I do have to tell you that the house there was a hall for everybody. We had parties at night. The guys would come by my house and see if the lights were still on to talk to my mother and have, fun. So we pushed back the furniture and after we went out and do all the stuff there. And we had a pool. And so then it was one of the few. So it was fun. It was a great house. We had a great street. I lived next door to Deanna Listener, but Deanna was older, so she didn't pay much attention to me. But her brother was like my brother, because he was the same age, and we went to school together and did all our things together. And all the girls would come over to our house because they could see Stephen, who lived next door. And all of these girls on these pictures were dear, dear friends. Judy and Maxine were both Safers, and Gail used to be with us too. The four of us were always around, and we would treat Gail, because she was the youngest, and we would treat her like she was our baby because she was the youngest of us. But we all got together on weekends. I just found these pictures, and over on top is Claire Lynn Fleet, and down at the bottom is Frances Molliver. Those girls, it was a log bromer picnic at the center. The men's club had a log bromer picnic, and that's what those beauty queens. But every grade had it. So they had like 5th to 7th, and then 7th to 11th, and different groups. And on the right is Judy Shorstein, and in the dark hair and the red, and all the girlfriends. And then the top one was just events that we used to do at the house. So we had a great childhood. We were all close. We still, they were, to this day, I don't know what happened to Joy, but
I'm here. So that was a beauty contest with you guys in your bathing suits.
From the Log Bromer picnic at the center with the Center Men's Club. Today, of course, that would probably be a no-no. You can't do anything like that, but it was fun. We don't know. We were all friends. Who was first, who was second, that kind of thing. It wasn't a big deal.
Well, Marsha, can I say something?
Yeah.
Is my,
I think
your house was not just, it was for everybody. I mean, your entire family, don't forget you had a lot of aunts and uncles, cousins of all ages, and everybody hung at your house
Right.
all the time.
Mhm.
And you know, it was like where everybody spent all day on Sundays
Right. I was
because
gonna say,
every and you probably had about 10 cousins in your pool all
Right.
swimming with all your
Michael,
friends.
Michael, you have to do it
Michael, I'm going to ask you to hold your comments till the end, please. Or
right.
put any
Okay.
comments you have into our chat box.
He is right. Everything was at our house. And I have, like I said, my dad had 4 sisters. So the 3 sisters and my dad, they all came, and my grandmother lived there. So in our backyard. So we had every Sunday was at our house with Warman's. We had Warman's Deli on when we were the first to have a TV, so everybody came over to watch the Ed Sullivan Show on our TV, and we were the first to have. I was thinking that they all came over to do everything at our house. It's funny. Usually it's the girls, but it was my dad because my grandmother was right there, so we all did everything together.
So this confirmation class that you have, Mom, is quite the class. I don't know that I've ever seen one this large. Mine was probably 8 people. Was this just unusual? Was this the first class? And is
Well,
that Cantor Martin in the picture?
Yeah, that's Cantor Martin on the right. Yes, our class. I see Sandra's on. She sees it. Shirley Kravitz is there. Linda Weinstein is there. Myself, everybody you know is in there. Gail is right somewhere a little here on the front. Little teeny Gail, the second one. Yeah, it was great. I think it's because we were the war babies after war. And so we have a large class. We had 42 in our confirmation class. And we're all close.
That's great. And then you went to college. What made you decide to go to University of Georgia?
Well, I grew up here with the same people, the same Jewish kids. I did everything with that. I need to go. My dad went to Florida. I was always a Gator growing up, but I decided in the 11th grade, Gail Greenfield had a boyfriend called Stanley Greenfield, and he came to Jacksonville a lot during high school. So we all were friends with, so he invited Gail up for his fraternity party. And Gail and I decided we're going up there because I had a boyfriend from LTI that was at Georgia. So we went up for the party. In fact, Gail and I laughed about how did we get there? I guess we went on the bus. We have no idea. And how did we get home? But we went up for the party and I loved it there. So I decided instead of going where everybody I know is, I'm going to go. And I knew a lot of the people there from Camp Blue Star. So I said, this might be different. And so I liked it and I went back and I love every minute of it. It was great. And my sorority sisters pretty much were friends that I knew from camp or LTI, Camp Blue Star. And when I got in my sorority, we went, oh, I knew you, 10 years ago. So,
right. And then you were part of the washboard band. Obviously, yeah. I'm a legacy as well as my sister and my girlfriend Faye, who's on Famous Rahi. We're all sorority sisters from DeFi at University of Georgia as well. So,
and your father was fraternity with Faye's father, so they were fraternity brothers.
Small world, very small world.
Yeah.
Next slide. So then you meet Dad at University of Georgia and come back here to Jacksonville to get married, right? How did you and Dad meet?
We got married young because Ronnie had graduated, but his dad said you have to get a job first before you can get married. So I was in Jacksonville, he was in Atlanta. Well, in those days, it doesn't work. I said I could have stayed home, maybe with my dad, but we didn't visit with the guys alone in those days. So we were engaged. When we started dating, it was New Year's Eve of 1 year. By April at college, we got lavalier. Then I got pinned, and then the next New Year's Eve we got engaged. So it was like a year, and then we got married. So it was. And then we moved, so that was it. Then I had two of you on the right, and only the third one is not in that picture. So it's funny how we realized after we did it that my son is not in there, but I do have 3 children.
Yeah, so that leads us to, you know, you go to Georgia, you meet dad who's from Atlanta, you come back to Jacksonville, you get married, you go off and end up settling in Atlanta, who, you know, obviously large Jewish community in Atlanta, but we ended up moving back to Jacksonville when I was in the 4th grade, and grew up in San Jose Forest, surrounded by, even though I had all my great uncles, great aunts and great uncles and cousins here, we quickly developed our own family, which we refer to as the Havara, which I don't know, I mean, those were your very close friends as well. And I know you also then started teaching at the center. You were teaching the 3-year-olds when Lee, I think you started doing that when Lee was going to the center.
Right.
Because I'm 7 years older than him. So, and you were teaching with Mrs. Paul, right?
I was going to say that's Judy Paul on the right, and myself. But interesting is that Tali Bielski's in the picture, Ronnie Gordon is in the picture, Faye Setzer is in the picture, and the curly tall boy is Sandy Zimmerman, who is a president now of a lot of things. So he said he learned it all in his 3-year-old class when we have meetings, but he doesn't remember. He's so little. So, I mean, was so little, but yeah, there's a lot of kids you all know in that particular class that Judy and I taught there. I taught there for 10 years until my brother got killed, and then I had to leave. So that was unsad for me, but you know, I loved it. All the little kids. And now those kids are telling me what to do now in the organizations. You know, if I drove them to school, they're now the president or the executive or whatever of everything. So
Right.
I'm the one
leaders.
they're telling what to do.
Okay, next slide. All right. So I believe now, Helen, I think I turned it over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Joy, for interviewing your mom.
Of course. Thank you for letting me be the person to ask all the questions. It's a lot of good information.
As it should be, as it should be. So before we move on, I just want to, I hope no one is looking at the clock. We're not going to be over at 8. We're going to go over a little bit. And then when we stop recording, if any of you want to stay on and chat, I know that there's been a lot of interest in these early years. But Marsha, I want to talk to you a little bit about your leadership in Jacksonville, especially in the Jewish community. This is a great newspaper article that probably took place in the 50s, tell by the hats. It was before your time. But when did you join Hadassah?
I joined Hadassah in Atlanta. I was a charter member of the Peachtree, which was a younger group in Atlanta when we were all newlywed
Siegel
and stuff in Atlanta. Then when I came to Jacksonville, I was a charter member of Sheer Lee. So until I got old enough that they kicked me out. Not really, but you know, they wanted me to move to a different chapter. And the girls that were younger there had younger children now. So I was ticked. I loved being in Sheer Lee. I think Barbara Zimmerman was the president of Sheer Lee when I was in there, that group. But my aunt Teddy Moskovitz, or great aunt, I guess it would be, or cousin, my cousin Teddy, she was involved when I actually moved here. Right before that, she was president of Hadassah. But the ladies that influenced me were Joni Waits, Hilda Goldstein, Rhoda Kagan. What's interesting to me as I was talking about this group is that those women each had a daughter that also was a leader in Hadassah. So it goes from generation to generation in Hadassah. My daughters are life members, and my daughter also. We're all there in life membership, and I
Marsha,
enjoy.
one of the things that we talked about was the way the newspaper article listed the names. You'll notice that
Yes, Mrs. No, I'm one of those that got on the pedestal and said, we're not doing that anymore. I am Marsha Pollock. I'm Mrs. Ronald Pollock, but I'm Marsha Pollock. So I started lobbying to get the women to have their own names, even at the plaques in the synagogues, you know, Mrs. this, Mrs. that. I said, you know, we're doing the work and it should be our name, you know, and the yearbook used to be that way. Now it could be your name with them in parentheses, you know, that, or Mrs. whatever. But most of the time you go by your name. And that was a new thing for those years, you know, women were making an issue about it, you know.
Well, that should have been a sign that you were a born leader. Some changes. Just real briefly, I've listed the groups here. Jacksonville Hadassah is one chapter now, but many years ago, and you mentioned when you first moved here, there were several groups. You joined Cheerly first, is that correct?
Correct. And
That
then,
was the young people?
yeah, well, it was, you know, most of us had little children or, you know, younger. We're just starting out, most to be, like I said, I know Barbara Zimmerman wasn't doing, you know, she was Barbara Zimmerman then, and she, you know, was the leader of the group. And we all knew each other and were friends. That's how we made friends with Hadassah. But we did education, we did fashion shows. We've done I love the education days, and we did play skits. And so there was a lot of activity. I was looking through the files. There was a ton of activity always about Hadassah. And later on, they asked me to move to Tikva, which was the regular day group. I think Shirley, we might have met at night, and the day group was Tikva. There were several adult ones on Hadassah. I knew people in all of them. And I moved to Tikva, and they asked me to be president. And I said, well, I can do it for 1 year. I can't do it because I'm in line to be president of the Jacksonville Jewish Center. So they took that and said that'd be fine. And I've always been active. I've been in all the activities and shows. I just couldn't do it. So I enjoyed my time as president of Tikva Hadassah. And we did great things. We did.
Absolutely. I hear great stories about that time. Well, great segue. As Shirley mentioned, you were the first woman president of a synagogue in Jacksonville. And I, of course, I had a lot of questions about that when we first talked. How was that for you? I mean, obviously you weren't counted as a minion at that time at the center. Probably couldn't take an aliyah at that time.
Not in Jacksonville. I did previously.
I meant at the center.
Yeah, previously I had traveled the state for Women's League, which is the Sisters of the State, and they did in other synagogues. So for me, it was strange to be sitting on the beamer to hold, you know, and have that aliyah and stuff like that, because we did not do that at the Jacksonville Jewish Center, but it was done then. And when I became president, there were several people that were disturbed, men that were disturbed about it. I mean, I think Mr. Shmunis, I'm going back to that, he still belonged to the center, but he would go to services over at Chaim. And even David Mizrahi, who I love, he was a little, why women, you know, and Kornblum. But I went and I did it, and I sat up there and I kept my legs together and closed. It was very awkward. But we did, it was an 8-day-a-week job. Synagogue is an 8-day-a-week job, and there are only 7 days, you know, so being up on the bima with the rabbi, it was wonderful, you know, it was, but it was very difficult. It's a bigger job than I've ever had before. That was the biggest job, because like I said, it runs 8 days a week. It's not from event to event. It's every day.
Who was the rabbi during that time?
I think it was Rabbi Grunfast for a little bit.
Okay.
And I had Eric, who was a little bit of they had just redid some of the building, the Jacksonville Jewish Center in Mandarin was being refurbished then. So we were in a lot of trailers and stuff on the side too, but it worked fine. Well, I know leery.
I spoke to two of your fellow synagogue presidents. Deanna
Well-
Lister, who of course was president of Beth Shalom, and Ruthie Nachman, who was president of the temple, first woman president of the temple. They both
Right.
shared the same story with me, that one of their concerns was sitting on the bima. And I laughed because that's certainly not a concern that men have when they're sitting on the bima. Right?
It was awkward, but that was a year that I was by myself. And then the next year, the girls, they did a program, and it was Ruthie and Deanna and myself, and none of us can remember, and Lois Chapnick. Lois Chapnick, of course, was the first woman for the JCA. But in those days, we did a program. We had a TV show on Sunday, like a Jewish TV show, like they had nationally, but we didn't have it. And I'm thinking, who recorded it? We were at the JCA. We all sat there like being on Oprah or something. And they were asking us things about, sharing what we all thought. And we're trying to figure out who did it. What was it? And I think it could have been Dan. I think Dan would have done the filming. I'm not sure, but we had each other. Dan Kossoff. But I think we bonded together and sort of knew what the other was thinking, because we were the first. All of us were the first.
That would be great if we can uncover those tapes. We'll have that'll be my next project when this
I think it could have been. We're guessing.
Everybody's attention to this list of organizations. These aren't just organizations that Marsha was a member of. These are organizations that she was a president of. And I just think that is just daunting, and hats off to you. As referenced in the previous slide, and you have been involved in so many organizations, but you also received many recognitions for some of the work that you've done. I wondered first if you could just share any significant memories that you have of either your work with River Garden or with the Federation or with Women's League, because these were really leadership positions at a time when most of the women who took lead, like you, were volunteers, but this gave you a lot of leadership training, didn't it?
My son-in-law always says I probably should have been a president of a corporation instead of free. But I always did the volunteer. Yes, I did. I couldn't give big bucks, but I could do something. First, it started with, wealth, wisdom, and charity. I think the best was that I had to, if it was any organization, I wanted to participate in some way or the other. I know it started in Norton. We got points for raising money and all that stuff. And then, it just became something I needed to do because I couldn't give them millions of dollars or $1,000. So I did the work and then helped them raise the money. So that's how it all started. These women in this picture, pretty much all of them are professionals. They were professionals. I was, maybe Leslie, we were volunteers, but the rest of them had careers and work. So for me, it was different. Actually, Polly was, a newcomer, an immigrant, and she got on her. All of us were for different things, a distinctive award, and because they called it Extraordinary Women. So it was a big
honor.
A big honor. I think that was one of the biggest, other than the Joe P. Safer Award. I thought that was my biggest honor for the community, and it was way back a long time ago, but it's still a big award, the Joe P. Safer. So community leader. And the one on the left is where we all of these are different. It's Colleen from JFCS and Francine from JFCS, and then the leaders of the corporations and the JCA, Federation, and Marty is River Garden, and Resnick, the rest in peace, was in that. So we were all leaders at that particular time. It was been a lifetime. I met so many people. I've grown. I was educated. Things I would have never done or have known about just through volunteer. In fact, they told me you could really write a thesis and get a degree in college for volunteer work. And one of my friends in St. Pete did that. So it's benefiting to you to do these things, and you meet people, you travel around. So it was wonderful.
That's wonderful. We are a grateful Hadassah chapter and a grateful community for all you've done. Well, I'll be remiss if I didn't also just take a moment to remember the work you did with Mosaic. And a lot of people here in Jacksonville probably remembered when the exhibit came to Jacksonville. It came to several communities. That's how I really got to meet you, Marsha, was I knew you had done this work, and I had just moved myself from St. Petersburg, and my aunt was very involved with Mosaic too. So my radar when I came here, hearing one of your programs, I was just very impressed with that. Tell us a little bit about putting this information together and the importance of preserving this history.
Well, this was a big project of my friend Marsha Pollock, who I met through ORT years before. And then she took this on as her project. So she knew me. I was on the board of the Jewish Museum in Miami, and I would fly down there for some meetings, and it got a lot to go back and forth. But anyway, I was on the board, and we did the mosaic, and we had a display here in Jacksonville on a board I wanted to get at the JCA permanently and change the things around, but that never happened. But we did have the board that traveled around with the important things, and I had the slides. I probably still have them in some storage. The slides that told about the beginning of Jacksonville and the Zelinskis and the Colemans and the people that actually from the temple that were the first. We had a mayor that was Jewish. We had the senator that was Jewish from the early days. And who knows that? So Marsha, we got this, and we've been doing those slides and presentations to different groups before she wrote her book and did all the other stuff. So it's been going a long time, but in a small scale. And now it's fabulous. There's a Jewish museum. Everybody should visit it when they're down in South Florida on Washington Avenue. And it was an old synagogue, and now it is the museum. And they do fabulous programs even online. And a lot of Jacksonville things, which is that clock right there, are all from Jacksonville people. There's a bris knife. There's this watch here. There are wedding photos. There were Herman Paul's father and my uncles. They have different things up every time, like artists or retailers, so they do these exhibits, and it's all Jewish people in Florida, from Florida. And I enjoyed that work too. It's interesting, and you can get the newsletter from them too, that comes out by joining the museum.
That's terrific. It's a wonderful museum.
They've done a great job because it's Florida history, and not everybody does, the Jewish history of Florida.
Well, I was just thinking, as we are stressing the importance of getting our families' histories, you have really taken one step farther to get some of the history of Florida families, which is really commendable. Well, I'm going to move from all the work you've been doing, almost done with the work you're doing. You're retired now, but you are as active as ever. Got a couple of pictures here of some of the current work that you still do, volunteering with the Sisterhood and with Hadassah and River Garden. What is it about volunteer work that you think is important?
Well, somebody's got to do it. They have to do it. It was here for me when I moved to Jacksonville. I had young children, and everything was here for me. So I felt like I had to do my part to make sure it's here for the next generation, because we are the inheritors of a glorious past, but we are also the ancestors of the future yet to come. So they're going to be looking one day, our children are going to be looking to us and what we did and what happened and how Jacksonville came to be, and all. They're going to go through us. So we have to continue to do the work so that our community will still be a Jewish community, and all of its organizations will still thrive, because we help here and abroad. And so it's mainly for the Jewish people. I mean, I've done March of Dimes. I've done the neighborhood walks for when I lived in the house, they'd call me to money for all the different things and take the envelopes to houses. And I did that. But I thought there's a million other people that can do that, but there's only Jewish us that are going to do for us. So I really kept it more into the Jewish theme, but I've done plenty of other, I did Duval County schools. I've done, it's different. Jewish work is different.
That is beautifully said. Thank you so much. Well, it's not all work for you. I've got two pictures here that I'd like you just to share. Joy mentioned two sets of friends. One were your girlfriends from your school days that you still get together, and one were friends when you moved back to Jacksonville with Ronnie and the children. And those friends, your Havara, became like an extended family as well. So anything you want to say about all these beautiful faces?
Well, the girls on the left, that's just one picture. I have different years had different girls in it. So I didn't, pick. I got those pictures to take because we're getting ready to have a reunion, and all the girls, one lives in Texas. She's on here tonight. One lives in Michigan, and we're going up to the Berkshires to her place. We've met in St. Augustine. We met in Savannah. We meet, and it started really, we've always gotten together like at Christmas time when they come home to see their folks, we'd have lunches and all. Then when we had 50th birthday, we decided to have our weekends. So we did a away trip, and we've done it since our 50th, and now we're on our 80th year. So some of us are even over 80, and we're having one this year. So all of us have known each other since kindergarten. We've known each other since we went to the center kindergarten or nursery school or Hebrew school. We've known each other all the way through high school. We went to high school together, and we still meet. And there could be, this year there may be 10 that are coming up to Michigan, but sometimes we've had 19. So it's a great group. I love them all. And we've been friends our whole lives with our parents and all. So, and the one on the right is my Havara. And some people are missing, but this is the initial group that started. And there are plenty others in our huge Havara. We have all our holidays together, and our kids are like cousins to each other, because some of the girls moved, like Shirley moved here from Australia, had no one here. And Randy moved here, had no one here. Rhoda and I were the only ones. Annetta moved here, and then her parents came. But we all do every holiday. We share, like one will do Rosh Hashanah, one does a break fast, one does Thanksgiving. We try to, and then we got so big, we couldn't do the Thanksgiving thing because our kids are everywhere, but we still get together, and our children think of themselves as their relatives, their cousins and aunts and uncles. We call each other aunt and uncle. David Bielski calls me Aunt Marsha. So it's just our life. We do everything, we're a clique, but we're more than that. We're like family. We really are. I mean, I've known Abe and Arthur since we're little, and so we're still together. And Shirley and Randy or Annetta are dear friends. Rhoda I've known through Arthur. So we do that with our children and with their spouses and family. So it gets pretty big.
That's terrific. Well, of all the hats you wear, I know you're also proud of being a mom and a grandma. And although we're running a little short on time, I want you to take a few minutes just to kvel. This is your family. Tell us things, introduce us to your family. Kvel a little.
Okay. My son is on the left. My second daughter is in front of him. Then there's Ronnie and I, and then Joy and Bob. I have to say my son-in-law, Bob, is fabulous. They just moved here. They've been away for 30 years, and Joy's been away 40. And Ronnie and I have been here all alone with no one else for all these years. And they moved back here, and it was the most surprising, wonderful thing that could happen to us in our old age. So I really have to thank Bob. Anytime I have a problem, he's here. So I appreciate that. It's something we never had. Now, my grandchildren are the best. I mean, these pictures, they're so little, and I love it. The one in the middle and the tall there he's going to be 29. The other one is 26. 7 and the other one's 26. So the 3 boys were my first group of grandchildren. And then later, my son had the 2 little ones. So I have 1 granddaughter and she's a senior and the youngest is 14. So I go from 14 to 29 years old and grandchildren, and they're all have jobs and they do great. And the 2 little ones are A students. So I love them all. In fact, I got a call from one of my grandsons this morning and said, Nana, I can't watch. What am I going to do? I said, don't worry, it'll be recorded. But he called and then he said to me, did you get your hair done, Nana? He knows me. And then he said, you know, so they really concerned and they're sweet. So I love them all. They're dear to me.
Sounds like they know you pretty well.
2 daughters and a son. My daughter-in-law's not in that picture. She'll be in the other picture. So she's great too. She's really right in there.
Well, here's that picture that you mentioned.
I have 2 children live in Atlanta.
This is a little more recent. I
Right.
wanted you to, and although you've touched on many of these themes, just to end with, what is that legacy you want to pass on to this beautiful family? What are the words you live by, the values you hold close?
Well, they know that I love my Judaism, and they've all been good about doing it and keeping it. And so I don't worry about any of that. I know they'll do the right thing when they need to do it, and they know what I feel about it. And like I said, they're in the inheritors of a glorious past, but now they got to be the ancestors of the futures yet to come. And I hope that they will just believe and do all this stuff, because somebody's got to do it.
Thank you so much,
No,
Marsha. I want to thank you. I want to thank your husband who loaned you to me for these last couple of months.
I know he asked me.
Of course, I appreciate the time that you put in, and Shirley. I spoke to a lot of people. Some of them are listed, some of them are not, who've shared stories to give me a little bit more background. And of course, Stacy Goldring, who started this series, and we really are looking forward to continuing it. So I thank you all very much. And I am going to stop our recording.